Let's give him a nice round of applause while he comes up. While he gets everything set up, I've been told that he like long and extreme sport, like trail running, writing code, and maybe something else.
That's the most extreme sport. Whoa.
Okay. I think we are almost set up and ready for our last talk. Are we?
What? Yeah.
Let's give him another round of applause.
Okay, just a moment. Whoa, no slides? Yeah, heard that. Sorry, just kidding.
It's okay.
Yeah, just kidding.
I may have to tell them a joke. That's,
Yeah. Whoa, full screen?
Okay.
No, okay. Okay, so let's start. In exhausting sports, I like to add writing with JavaScript, of course. And other than this, also migrate application from Vue 2 to Vue 3. And I will talk about that today. I am Denny. I'm a professional web developer, full stack, working with Python and JavaScript and talking with animals in spare time. But let's start with a nice timeline in Vue.js. They released version 2.6 in 2019, and how many of you are using Vue.js at version 2.6? Raise your hands. Whoa, nice. Then they released version 3 in 2020, 3.1, 3.2, and then this year, in February, they set the version 3 as the new default. How many of you are using Vue.js 3 in production? Well, great. Good for you. And then in July, they set version 2 of Vue.js in maintenance mode. They released version 2.7, and it will reach the end of life in 2023, so 13 months from now. We've still got a lot of time. And let's start from the beginning. In 2020, they released version 3 with composition API, script setup, experimental at that time, and no Internet Explorer support, but who cares? We just celebrated it's that this morning. And at that time, I was like, no, wrong key. I was like, whoa, I want to migrate everything to Vue.js 3. And I started to look at the documentation. And it was great. Options API was working as well in Vue.js 2 and 3. So no changes in there. But they added composition API using setup in the default component. So you can just write the setup function, adding constant and function, returning them, and they are passed in the context of the component. And if you want to use that in Vue.js 2, you can just install Vue Composition API, add this plugin to Vue.js, and import everything from that, and it works. Well, not yet. There are broken tests, but this is an easy fix. You can just use the same Vue usage of Vue Composition API also in test files, and that's fixed. But the most awesome part, for me at least, it's the composition API and script setup. So you can write your script setup, declare constant and function in there, and they are automatically exposed to the template context. And that's it, easy, pretty, and perfect for me. So this year, 2022, in February, they set Vue.js 3 as new default, and this requires a couple of potential actions in your package.json file, Because if you are using it like this, so declaring in dependencies latest version, well, you need to stick to version 2.6 in order to make it work with previous version of Vue.js, and same for other dependencies. This is not a problem if you are using a package log file or a yarn log file, so please use them. They are safer than using just package.json file. But if you are not using that, please just use this kind of character, the caret, I think, in order to bind a specific dependency to a specific measure version. So, for example, for Vue, it is 2 point whatever. Spoiler alert, this kind of notation means 2 point whatever. So starting from July, they released Vue.js 2.7, and if you were using dependencies without compatibility with Vue.js 2.7, everything was breaking because you had to change it to use a tilde, because the tilde means 2.6 point whatever. So please use a log file and everything is gone and it's working. So again, this year, 2.7 released with composition API and script setup, partial, but yeah, kind of nice, for Vue.js 2. So again, I was like, whoa, what is 2.6? I don't want it anymore. I want Vue.js 2.7. And well, I like to suffer, so the migration guide is for that reason. And first step is to upgrade your Vue CLI dependencies with this command. After that, you need to upgrade your Vue.js 2.7. Well, please make sure all other dependencies are Vue.js 2.7 compatible, but yeah, let's assume that for now. And you can remove Vue template compiler because it should be unnecessary from now, except if you are using tests. How many of you are testing the front end? No. Well, yeah. Yeah, a couple of people, 5 or 6. Well, okay, so you don't need a Vue template compiler except for 5 or 6 people. And then you need to check your sub-dependencies. You need to have at least this version for Vue Loader and Vue.me. If not, you need to remove node modules and your log file and perform a fresh install in order to ensure they are at latest version. And then you can remove, if you already used it, Vue Composition API, because it's kind of included in Vue 2.7. Please remember to remove it from test files and everywhere, and just import everything from Vue.js, from the Vue dependency. If you need more information about Vue 2.7 upgrade, you can read the official blog post, and then you can change all of your components using the new script setup, removing export default, setup function, and whatever, and just use script setup. After that, after changing all of your components, well, you can commit, push, and deploy, or not. Well, you will have a broken Vue router usage if you are using Vue router. Why that? Because, well, there is no this.root or router anymore. You need to upgrade your Vue router installation to at least 3.6.5 with useroot and userouter, and using them like you will be using them in Vue.js 3. Kind of the same for Vuex store if you are using Vuex. So you can now import the store and navigate through it, because you can't use this.store anymore. So you can use it like this. Or maybe you won't consider the migration to Pinia, but there is another talk maybe next year. And now, well, yeah, you can not commit, push, and deploy, because, well, if you are writing tests, well, tests won't work anymore with strange error because they aren't able to find methods or properties from your component. And the reason is that dependency over there, Vue2Jest version 27, because it's not working with Vue.js 2.7. But we have a solution. In September 15, they released Vue2Jest 29.1 with support for script setup in Vue 2.7, and everything is good, right? No, with Jest 29. Problem is, in Vue CLI dependencies, they are using Jest 27, so it's not compatible. And you need to, well, drop your Vue CLI plugin and use Jest directly. How can you do it? Well, you can just copy-paste the default configuration from them in your Jest config file and update your package.json test script using Jest directly, and then call your tests, and everything should work. Well, you are, again, using the version 27, so maybe not everything, but if it works at the same way as before, you are in the right path. Then you need to remove their CLI plugin and install everything by yourself. So environment.js DOM, just copy paste my slides and that's it. Yeah, make sure to install Jest 29, Babel Jest, and Vue2Jest 29, and everything should work now. Fixing deprecation warnings in the Jest config file, and everything is working. Well, not everything, because now components using script setup are closed by default. So if you were spying on a method of a component, well, that won't work anymore, even if you use define expose. But there is a temporary workaround. Please don't use that. But you can spy if you are in a hurry and you need to make things work. Well, just spy on the setup state of your wrapper VM, or if you have little more time, just follow the documentation, the official Vue.js documentation, and so you need to test what a component does, not how it does it. So if you want to check that clicking on a button, something changes in your component, well, you don't need to spy on the method triggered by the button click, but you need to check that after clicking the button, your component template, your component is as you expect. And that's it. That's migration to Vue 2.7. And that was the easy part. Now, well, prepare yourself. It's time to migrate to Vue.js 3. They prepared an entire website for the migration, containing new features, breaking changes, recommendations, and documentation about the migration build. Let's start from breaking changes. Well, there is an entire page for that, but they say that, yeah, a lot of Vue.js, it seems that has changed, but well, it's kind of the same. You can use composition options API and so on. But we want to provide you an entire website for the migration. And so, well, you just have to read it. They have new framework level recommendations. So a new version of router, DevTools, TestUtils with Vue.js 3 support. New build toolchain, so from Vue CLI to Vite. State management from UX to Pinia, Vector to Volar, Vite to Vitest, and so on. There is a long list. But you don't need to migrate everything at once. Well, there are a couple of easy migrations. First one, DevTools, just update your browser. Second one, you just need to, if you use VS Code, for example, you just need to change and install another plugin called Volar, and that's it. Apart from that, there are mandatory changes, migrations, sorry. So a new version of ViewRouter, a new version of Vuex, or Pinia, but maybe another time. New version of test-utils dependencies, but nobody is testing, so who cares? And of course, third-party libraries. If you are using Beautify, Quasar, and Element UI, and so on, well, you need to wait for them to... Or your own library, of course. You need to wait for them to update to Vue.js 3. And for the moment, you can avoid the migration to Vite and Vitest, just for the moment, because they are great tool. And I think Vue CLI, it's placed in maintenance mode. Not sure, but I think so. Jest is a great tool, but if you are using Vite, well, why don't use Vitest? So, well, maybe, again, another talk. And now we are at the migration build. There is a dependency for that, Vue compat. It's a build of Vue.js 3 with configurable Vue 2 behavior. It runs in Vue 2 mode by default, and the usage of changed and deprecated features will emit runtime warnings. So it's super useful, super scary, but super useful. It has no limitations because, well, dependencies that rely on Vue 2 internal APIs or undocumented behavior, workarounds, and so on, well, they much likely not work. And for example, usage of private properties on vnodes, so Beautify, Quasar, Element UI, and so on, it might be tricky to migrate. Internet Explorer support is dropped. I'm sure you're sad for this, but yeah, you need to accept it. And server-side rendering. If you have server-side rendering, well, you need to complete the migration before to move on, because with Vue compat, it might not work. Expectations. Well, it aims to cover only publicly documented behavior of Vue.js 2. But they say that if your application is large and complex, the migration will likely be a challenge, even with this tool. Well, I will add, even if your application is medium size, will be a challenge. But yeah, everyone likes a challenge, so go on. Let's start with upgrading our Vue CLI, like we did before, so in the same way. Or if you are using just Webpack, you need to upgrade your Vue loader to at least version 16. Then you need to install your Vue compat version. At the moment I wrote the slides, we were at 3.2.39. And upgrade your Vue.js installation to the same version. You can remove Vue template compiler in this moment. Then you need to alias Vue to Vue compat in your Vue.js config file and use a compatibility config mod in Vue.js 2. If you are using TypeScript, you need also to update your typings file in this way. Just copy paste and that's it. Easy. And then you need to fix compile time error running npm run serve, if any. When you fixed compile time error, you just need to update your configuration to compatibility config mod to version 3, and that's it. You should be able to run your application in the browser. Then you can open the browser, open your console, and well, yeah, you might see a couple of warnings, maybe a lot of them. And well, in this moment, you should be able to run your app. No? Yeah, trust me. And you should see a lot of warnings in the console. In this moment, you need to focus on fixing your own source code warning first, because you will see a lot of warnings from Vuex, ViewRouter, Vuetify, other libraries. But in this moment, you just need to fix your own source code. Then you can focus on other dependencies later. And if you are using transitions, well, this kind of change is the only one that is not visible in warnings. So you need to do a search and replace in your code. And then, yeah, you can move to update your app entry to use the new global mounting API. So create app instead of new view app and so on. But just leaving the options like they were, so router, store, and so on. And now it's time to upgrade one by one your dependencies. For example, you can upgrade Vuex to version 4, upgrading its definition from new view store to create store. The state became a function instead of an object. And you can declare it and use it in your app like that. Then in your components, in your composition API components, you need to use store from Vuex and use the store navigating through it. And it's kind of the same for ViewRouter, so you need to install the latest version, upgrade your router configuration, applying a couple of breaking changes, for example, the create web history, you need to add that. And then use your router in this way and upgrade your composition API usage like we did in Vue 2.7 migration. After this, after upgrading all other libraries, for example, graphical libraries or so on, you need to pick off individual warnings, if any remaining, and always referring to the doc for fixing them. In the end, you can remove the migration build component, Vue compat, and switch officially to Vue.js 3 when all warnings are fixed. And, well, of course, if you have dependencies that rely on Vue.js, you won't be able to do so, but if not, well, everything should work. And again, you are ready to commit, push, and deploy. Well, maybe all of you, except for 5 people, because we will have broken tests. We need to upgrade our testing packages. So instead of Vue 2 Jest, we need to install Vue 3 Jest and the new version of test utils and use it in the Jest configuration. Applying a couple of breaking changes. For example, props data is now props. There is the more create local view, so just remove it. Mocks and stub are now in global option, so you need to change your mounting syntax in test files. And well, this is my favorite, find all. It's not an object anymore. It's a proper list, so you don't need to use .at the position on the element, but just an array, so perfect. And there might be a couple of strange warnings. So, for example, in my tests, I was using snapshots in the wrong way. So I was expecting that the wrapper was matching a snapshot and not the wrapper.html. So just need to fix that. And that was another strange error happening. So Vue.js is not defined. What? I'm using Vue.js everywhere. So I searched through GitHub issues and, of course, Stack Overflow, and I found out this solution. You need to update your Jest config. Adding this, well, everything is working. And so it's really time to commit, push, and deploy your project and work on Vue.js 3. But remember, we passed through environment updates, breaking changes, broken tests, and a lot of strange stuff. But I think it's worth it. Now we are in Vue.js 3 and everything is nice, everything is perfect. Yeah, great. Maybe. So, as a quick recap, if you want to stick with Vue.js 2.6, but using Composition API, well, you can install Vue Composition API dependency and use in setup only Composition API. If you just want to upgrade to 2.7 just to experiment on Composition API and script setup, just update to 2.7 and stick with all dependencies like Beautify or other stuff. But if you need long-term support for your code base, well, I think you really need to migrate to Vue.js 3. Whatever, because that will be the final version and destination you need to reach. Thank you very much. I leave you a couple of links with documentation and works, repository, and so on. And again, thank you for having me here. I propose an applause to Niccolò for presenting all of us. And thank you very much.
And let's give him a nice round of applause. So, I have a couple of questions from the folks following at home.
Whoa.
So, the first one, Ivan asks, would you recommend using classes and interfaces in a brand new Vue 3 application? And if not, how do you believe is the best way to maintain a Vue 3 app the best way as possible?
Well, I'm not using TypeScript, so I don't know. I would recommend to use it because I think it's more reliable. But I'm not using it because I'm just moving from version 2 of Vue.js, plain JavaScript, to version 3. So I don't have measure suggestions. Sorry.
Okay, one step at a time.
Yeah.
Okay, but we have two more coming from the
Whoa.
web. So, German asks, if I work with 2.6 or a lower version, do you believe that migrating to 2.7 would be a good first step before migrating to Vue 3?
Well, I think so, because you kind of get used to the syntax without too much effort. And you can start to update your jests and your environment to a compatible version with Vue.js 3. So you will be already with Vue CLI updated, jest detached. So the next step will be maybe moving to Vitest or Vite for just the code. And so, yeah, it's for me, it was the first step towards the migration.
And the last question just ties to this, which is, do you think it is worth, Alberto says, do you think it's worth to first migrate to Vitest and then to Vue 3?
Well, in my work project, I just did it. So I'm stuck with Vue.js 2.7 in our biggest project because we are using Beautify and they have a lot of breaking changes for migrating to Vue.js 3. So we are stuck on Vue.js 2.7, but I wanted to change something because, well, I paid to do so. So I started the migration from Jest. Well, at first I detached Jest from Vue CLI, and then I decided to, well, why using Jest? Let's use Vitest, and yeah, that was it. So it was my first step in a big project.
Thanks. Any question from the audience here? Over there.
Hi, thank you for the talk. It was very interesting. I have a question about performance. Did you notice any performance drop using the Vue compatibility build? because I have a very big application and I may have to use that in production for at least a couple of months, and I'm a bit worried of performance drop in that case.
Well, of course there will be a performance drop because everything is checked for compatibility before running. So, well, if you have a big application and you are concerned about performance, well, before going to production, maybe it's better to migrate everything, and then when you are on Vue.js 3, just move to production. I know it's a big task because you need to create a branch and synchronize every time something changes in the Vue.js 2 branch. But yeah, I won't suggest you to go in production with compatibility mode enabled.
Thanks.
Well, any more questions? Good. It seems no. Let's give Denny another big round of applause.